From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Greetings. I'm Mary Jane Deep, Chief of the African and Middle Eastern Division of the Library of Congress, and I'm delighted, really delighted to welcome you all today for what promises to be one-of-a-kind program with Secretary Johnnie Carson, the U.S. Assistant Secretary for African Affairs. This division has hosted many programs over the years, but most have focused on only one or two of the 78 countries for which it is responsible. Today, however, our honored guest will be able to speak about his responsibilities for 54 of those countries. That's quite incredible. So it is indeed an honor and a privilege to be able to host him today. And he has taken time from his very, very busy schedule to be with us. So we are particularly grateful for this. How busy, you ask? Well, I went to the Department of State's webpage and looked for Ambassador Carson, and here are a few things I found. He has just come back from a trip to China, Japan, and the Republic of Korea, where he held bilateral meetings with his counterparts and co-chaired the 5th round of the US-China Sub-Dialogue on Africa in Beijing. In January, he will be traveling to Spain to meet with his counterparts in the European Union, then to Ethiopia, where he's attending the African Union Summit, on to Ghana, where he will confer with President Mills and attend a USAID conference, and then on to Togo, where he will be meeting with the President and Prime Minister, followed by a visit to Benin, where he's scheduled to meet with President Yayi and members of his cabinet, and finally to Nigeria, where he will be meeting with members of civil society and representatives of the state government. And this is just in a period of 3 months. And he has been that active for all of his professional life. So to tell you more about Assistant Secretary Carson's professional life, here is Eve Ferguson, the Senior Reference Librarian for East Africa in this division, who knows all about life in the diplomatic world, as she is the daughter of a diplomat herself and spent part of her youth in East Africa. So Eve Ferguson.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, and welcome to the African Section's last program of the year, 40 Years of Dedication to Africa, a dialogue with Ambassador Johnnie Carson. This program is being webcast for future viewing. Therefore, when you ask a question, you're agreeing to be recorded. My name is Eve Ferguson, as my boss, Mary Jane, mentioned, and I'm Reference Librarian for East Africa. I'll move through this pretty quickly because we want to give all the time to Ambassador Carson. You never know when he might be snatched away again. This program is very special to me as it's been 2 years in the making. In 2009, when I first heard Ambassador Carson speak at the African Studies Association annual meeting in New Orleans, it occurred to me that he and my late father, C. Clyde Ferguson, Jr., had much in common in their diplomatic careers, including work in Nigeria and a posting as U.S. Ambassador to Uganda. On that premise, I approached Ambassador Carson with an open invitation to speak at the Library of Congress. Later, I met with Ms. Nicole Peacock, who has been instrumental in making this day possible, and told her about my idea to have Ambassador Carson speak at the library. Over the next 2 years, I doggedly pursued his friends, Steve McDonald, his scheduler, and anyone else who might be able to put a plug in. Being the gracious diplomat that he is, Ambassador Carson agreed. The next hurdle was finding a date that he could speak in his extremely busy schedule. Fortunately for us, today is the day. When Ambassador Carson was appointed as Assistant Secretary of State for the Bureau of African Affairs by President Barack Obama in 2009, the President certainly could not have chosen someone more fitting for the job. Ambassador Carson knows Africa in a way that is both unique and deep. He began his relationship with the continent, as many do, as a Peace Corps volunteer in Tanzania in 1965. What is unique is that he continued to work in Africa and for Africa for another 4 decades, having held ambassadorships to Kenya, Zimbabwe, and Uganda. Prior to those posts, he worked in Botswana, Mozambique, and in Nigeria, where I found out was where he met my father. He has served as Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Bureau of African Affairs, as Desk Officer in the Africa Section at the State's Bureau of Intelligence and Research, as Staff Director for the Africa Subcommittee of the U.S. House of Representatives, among other positions. He has also received several Superior Honor Awards from the Department of State and a Meritorious Award from Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. The Centers for Disease Control presented Ambassador Carson with its highest award, the Champion of Prevention Award, for his leadership in directing the U.S. government's HIV/AIDS prevention efforts in Kenya. While Ambassador Carson speaks often and eloquently about the government's U.S. policies in Africa, as I recently heard him speak, I think it was just yesterday, about the Lord's Resistance Army that has plagued Uganda for 20 years and now spreads its scourge across the DRC, Central African Republic, and South Sudan. My goal with this program was to give him an opportunity to take off his diplomatic mantle and to talk about how and why he has dedicated the better part of his life's work to the nations and the people of Africa. Please help me welcome our VIP speaker, Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, Ambassador Johnnie Carson.
Eve, thank you very, very much for the very warm and very kind introduction, and for your continuing efforts to get me here. Let me also thank your boss, Mary Jean, as well, for her kind remarks and for going on to the website to find out my many, many activities. Indeed, 3 weeks ago, less than 3 weeks ago, I was in Beijing, Seoul, and Tokyo for dialogues with our Asian colleagues, particularly the Chinese, because they are doing so much in Africa today. I am going to make a couple of comments. Is this loud enough? Can you all hear me back? You all hear me back there? I am going to make a few comments that can be helpful in telling you what my responsibilities are today. Make a couple of plugs towards our policy and policies in Africa, and then maybe spend a few minutes of reflection on.
You know what I'm going to do?
Oh, okay. You tell me.
Let me see. You all can't hear back there, right? Right?
Push the microphone.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Okay, let's see if that can make it any better.
Can you hear me back there now? A little bit better? Huh?
You're still saying up.
You want to take it out of here and hold it? Okay, can you hear me? Better? 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 Sometimes we have to experiment with these things even here. Can you hear me back there now? Okay, again, I won't go back and say that I appreciate very much the warm introduction that Eve Ferguson gave me, and also the very kind remarks and introductory remarks by her boss as well, Mary Jean. I said that I would say a few words about where my responsibilities in Africa are, and only one slight correction to what was said before. Make a few comments about where we are on policy towards Africa, because that's what I do most of the time and feel most comfortable about. And maybe I can be drawn into a few reflections about my own life. In most instances, I don't have time on a day-to-day basis to reflect about my own career, what I've done, how I've done it, and more importantly, why I've done it. But I'll say a few words about that. It's more comfortable for me to analyze countries, politics, economics, events, peoples, and places, and not to spend a whole lot of time reflecting on my own life or looking in the mirror at about what I've done. Let me first of all say that I am enormously proud of the fact that both President Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton chose me to serve as the Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs. Given my own background and experience in Africa, can think of no more a honor than the one I've been received to do this job. For me, it's the pinnacle of a long career of working across Africa on both easy and difficult issues to be selected as the administration's chief policymaker on a day-to-day basis for Africa. It's an enormous pride that I will always have and take with me. In the Department of State, I don't cover, as Mary Jean said, all of Africa. That would make my life even worse than it is right now, or delightful on some days. I am responsible for some 49 states in sub-Saharan Africa. I am not responsible for what we call the Maghreb, those 5 states that exist across the Mediterranean. I don't do Egypt, Libya, Algeria, Tunisia, or Morocco, although all of you know who know Africa know that those states are as integral to Africa as the ones south of the Sahara that I deal with. And while I don't manage, coordinate policy on those 5 states, we in fact have to deal with them on a variety of issues. Libya is just one of them that's been in the news recently, and I'll say a little bit about that. But the other 49 states south of the Sahara, I am responsible for. My bureau is responsible for on a day-to-day basis. And those states are very small island states like Cape Verde or Comoros or Sao Tome and Principe, small states in Africa such as Togo and Benin and Swaziland and Lesotho, but also the giant states of Africa. Nigeria, with its population of 150 million people, with Sudan, with Ethiopia, countries that are enormous in size, including places like the DRC. Across those 49 states, we have 45 embassies and about 4 consulates. You hear the word expeditionary frequently when people talk about Iraq and Afghanistan. We're expeditionary in Africa as well. If any of you had been out to Juba in the last year or 2 years or 3 years, you know that we were expeditionary in Juba as well, the new capital of South Sudan. Where if you go into our compound, you see lift vans stacked on top of one another where our colleagues work and live. If you go into Goma in the eastern part of the Congo, where we also have an office, you'll see that we're expeditionary there as well in tough conditions. And if you go into places like Guinea-Bissau, you will see that we're on the ground there in conjunction with our colleagues from Portugal, where we don't have an embassy, but where we have a presence associated with the Portuguese. These are small places. Some of them are tough places on certain places, but we're all over the continent. We're there because we're projecting and trying to advance. We're projecting U.S. interests. We're trying to advocate and advance a set of U.S. policies, and they're centered around 4 objectives, 5 objectives, I'll say, that are very, very central to who we are, what we want to do in Africa, and help and partner Africans to do for themselves. The first thing that we are trying to do in Africa is to strengthen democracy, democratic institutions, and good government. We think these are extraordinarily important. They're important for us here at home. They're important for us across the globe. They're central and important for Africa. And I think Africa has done marvelously over the last 12, 18 months in terms of strengthening of democracy, supporting elections, and deepening democratic institutions. Yes, there are a lot of gaps out there, but the progress is significant. I'd tell all of you to take a look at an article in the Economies of September, which talks about the number of elections and the pace of democracy across Africa. It's a good news story out there by and large, despite the occasional very chilling and disturbing headline that you see. You may see a few on the DRC, the Congo, in the next 48 hours, because we expect in the next 5 or 6 hours our time that they will announce the presidential elections out there. But we must look beyond and behind the headlines. The second thing that we're doing is promoting economic development, economic reform, and sustained growth and development of Africa's economies. Africa has enormous economic potential. It has enormous economic riches and resources. It has the capacity to be a major global economic player. And this, in fact, should be Africa's century. It is, in fact, the last economic global frontier. It is the place where people should be going, where they ought to be going, where there is enormous potential. Africa, you've seen some of that potential in the enormous oil and gas resources of the continent. Continent currently provides something in the neighborhood of 18% of all the oil that's coming into the United States. It is right up there next to Saudi Arabia in what comes into this country. Nigeria provides us with about 7 to 8% of all of our petroleum needs. And it is the largest single source of low sulfur sweet crude oil coming into this country. We're a player out there. We're a significant player out there because not only are we producing, not only importing, we're producing and we're investing. We are major U.S. investors in Nigeria, major investors in the Angola. We're major investors even in places that are beyond my scope, Algeria, for example. But we're also a key player in new explorations and discoveries. The Gulf of Guinea, but Equatorial Guinea, for example, a small island nation which has enormous oil resources. Most of the recent production, exploration, deep water, I might add, has been done by American companies, and American companies dominate oil in Equatorial Guinea. Ghana, which has the capacity over the next decade and a half to transform its society, its economy, and lift it up into a much higher development category, has just discovered new oil. They came on stream last November, December. The exploration was done by Cosmos Energy, a small production company based here in the United States and in Texas. And indeed, can you hear me back there? Yeah, the Cosmos has done extraordinary work. And they do work that almost no one else can do. We talk about deep water drilling, but there's something called ultra deep, which requires enormous sophisticated technology to go down and get this oil. We have still a deep monopoly on the technology required to do not just the close to the shore or deep water, but I'm talking about what the experts call ultra deep drilling. But oil in Ghana will be significant, combined with its agriculture, combined with its strong human resource base, and its harbors and other transportation and economic means. It could take the country to an extraordinarily high level. But we're pushing that. But the real thing that I was going to come back to is that Africa on the economic side has not lived up to its potential. Despite what I've just said about oil, some 18% or so, going up probably in the next decade to about 25% of U.S. oil coming in from Africa. Africa accounts today for less than 2% of global trade. Less than 2% of global trade. That means they're hardly even registering out there in the marketplace. Equally, African countries, those 54 or the 49 that I'm talking about, trade with one another less than any other regional trading grouping. There's more trade going on between countries in Latin America than in Africa. More trade going on between and amongst countries in Asia than in Africa. More trade going on in the Middle East and in Europe than in Africa. And that has to change too. Has to do it. But there is tremendous opportunity. We want that opportunity to be realized. So that's our second objective in pushing our policy forward. Third thing that we're doing is trying to help Africa prevent and mitigate and resolve conflicts. Far too often, conflicts have set back democracy and good governance. They've also undermined the effort to build economies, but more devastating, they have destroyed lives. They have destroyed communities, and they have undermined the capacity of a nation to move forward. It has caused a need for a humanitarian response and emergency assistance. We're engaged in that, whether it's Somalia, whether it's in Sudan, South Sudan, whether it has been earlier in the year, into last year in Cote d'Ivoire. We're engaged in the eastern Congo, and we remain engaged in places like Zimbabwe. This is important for us. If, in fact, a nation is in conflict, it can't spend a lot of time on development, and it can't spend a lot of time on good governance. But the story there, too, is good and getting better, because while the headlines will continue to focus on Somalia, on Sudan, and on places like Zimbabwe, there has been a very sharp drop in the number of conflicts in Africa over the last 2 decades. We have seen the end of conflict in Angola. We've seen the end of conflict in Sierra Leone. We've seen the end of the conflict in places like Liberia. And while the DRC continues to be an ongoing concern, you have to remember that a decade ago, people were talking about the DRC as a country where Africa's first world war had taken place, because there were 9 countries involved with military troops on the ground in the DRC. Even that has improved significantly. And we're pushing this as well. Our diplomacy is very, very significant across the region. Eve mentioned that she heard me speak in a much more coherent and organized fashion, maybe I think yesterday on the LRA, but we're engaged in a number of efforts to promote peace and stability. It's a key for us. The fourth thing that we're doing is pushing the President's agenda on two significant and major initiatives that are central to Africa's development. Central to the development. One is the Global Health Initiative, which builds rightly on President Bush's PEPFAR program focusing on HIV/AIDS, which the President on December 1 at George Washington University in his speech announced a broader and a greater U.S. commitment to fight HIV and AIDS. I don't have to tell all of you how devastating this disease is, and why we focus it on Africa. You all know that Africa has about 10% of the global population, but it still has some 60 to 65% of all the HIV and AIDS cases. South Africa has the largest single number of AIDS cases of any country in the world, whether you're China or Russia, which have cases, or India, which large populations. The largest number remains in South Africa. Some African countries have been impacted enormously. Small country like Swaziland, it's estimated that some 28, 29% of the population is HIV positive. This is devastating. This is devastating for a country that is trying to both grow its economy and build its political institutions. But this is not uncommon around Southern Africa and Central Africa. But we've put a lot of focus on continuing the AIDS prevention programs, but also working in the area of malaria prevention. Improving clean water and stopping waterborne diseases like cholera, and helping Africa to rebuild its public health services and institutions so that they can be, like our own, preventive in nature as well as curative and reactive. So it's important. The other thing that we're doing, which is important, is the President's agricultural initiative. It's called Feed the Future. Africa regrettably missed the green agricultural revolution that has helped to transform Latin America and much of Asia in the late 1960s and throughout the 1970s. We are now trying very hard to bring that green agricultural revolution to Africa, to help Africa to feed itself, to end hunger at the household, village, and community level, and to be able at the upper end to turn agriculture as it is in this country into a major economic driver, creating agro-processing, creating agricultural exports, generating jobs, generating foreign exchange for people across the continent. This is what we're about as well in pushing this agenda. Again, it's absolutely essential. Some 65%, 70% of all Africans today primarily or secondarily depend on agriculture as a source of their economic livelihood. But if you look at the opposite side of the ledger, it's one of disappointment. Africa is still characterized by rain-fed agriculture. It has and produces the lowest yields per acre and hectare of any agricultural area in the world. It uses less fertilizer per acre per hectare than any area of the world, and it gets less in terms of its economic benefits and rewards. This does not have to be in an area of the world where there is a great deal of arable land and some of the great rivers of the world. So we're focusing on agriculture and healthcare. Have to be essential in development, and they help a part of that pyramid of 5 things that I've talked about. The last thing that we're doing out there is working with Africa in partnership to deal with a large range of transnational or global issues, issues that no country, large or small, militarily and economically powerful or economically weak and insignificantly militarily can deal with. Problems that we have to deal with on a global nature. Some of these challenges are new and are priorities for all. Some of them are new and lower for Africa. Some of them are old challenges. What am I thinking about here? I'm thinking about narco trafficking. I'm thinking about money laundering. I'm thinking about terrorism. But I'm also thinking about things like global weather and environmental change as well. Things that we must do together in order to be able to control the issues. That's what we do on a day-to-day basis as a broad sort of strategic concept that's out there. Those are the things that animate me, and I could, I'm, probably at this point giving you the 30,000-foot level, but could go down into all of these on a country basis with some detail. But let me do what Eve asked me to do. I'm not sure sometimes how and why people get to where they are. I have several vivid memories of growing up in Chicago, which is home for me, south side of Chicago. And it's still a very important part of my life. I tell people that in all my life I've only not voted absentee or present from the place where I grew up only once in my life. Have I not voted from the residence where my mother and father very nicely and brought me up as a kid. But I have a vivid memory of sitting on a stoop on a porch on the south side of Chicago with my father and one of his closest friends reading dispatches from the Middle East on political problems that were occurring in the 1950s. And just absolutely being fascinated and also being quizzed about what I had just read or had been read to about. And so that growing up also in a household where my father was a labor union organizer in Chicago, in a household that was pretty political, where he went out on election day, knocked on doors to find out whether people had voted, took them to the polling place if they needed to be driven, walked them if they wanted to be walked, and talking about political issues, economic issues, social issues around the table, and constantly coming back and saying, what's happening in Damascus? What's happening in Beirut? What's happening in Azerbaijan, in Russia, in Latin America? Very, very vivid memory of constantly being bombarded by both international politics and local politics of Chicago. Vivid early memories for me. I got started in Africa as a Peace Corps volunteer, fascinated by the fact that we had a new president who was sending out a clarion call that we all know. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Hearing the three things that the Peace Corps was all about: voluntarism, taking something abroad to help improve the lives of others, and bringing something back to the United States that was informed about what you had seen and done overseas. Very strong call. It's still there. 50 years anniversary of the Peace Corps this year, with, I might say, a very good friend of mine, Aaron Williams, who actually went to the same boys' high school on the south side of Chicago that I did. About 10 years later, I'm a lot older than Aaron, and again, public schools did produce people who could both speak, write, and do things in an, I think, hopefully thoughtful fashion. But it was Peace Corps that took me abroad, and I think the thing that was a driving element there was, damn, when I was in college, I saw people going off and doing a junior year abroad, and I said, that should be me. But I didn't have any money to do that. My parents didn't have any money to do that with, for me like that, and so Peace Corps was the natural target. Foreign Service was a natural target as well, because it was something that I was interested in and something that I wanted to do. I moved almost immediately out of the Foreign Service into out of the Peace Corps and into the Foreign Service very quickly. And indeed went as my first posting to Nigeria. And it was a fascinating time to be in Nigeria. It was at the very end of Nigeria's civil war. It had not yet concluded. Biafra was struggling. General Odumegwu Ojukwu, who just died just 3 weeks ago. If you were looking at the obituaries, you saw Odumegwu Ojukwu, who led Biafra, the Biafran campaign, was hanging on and trying to survive. But it was a time of great tension inside the embassy, which reflected the tensions in the country. We had, in the space of the 2 years that I was there, we had 3 ambassadors there. I got there with a man by the name of Ambassador Trueheart. I'm sorry, Elbert G. Matthews. Ambassador Elbert G. Matthews was the ambassador. And if he walked into this room, he could not have been better described than a picture out of a Graham Greene novel. Seersucker suit almost all the time, a white shirt, a bow tie, a white Panama hat, about 6'2", very slender, cool customer. Dictated the temperature of the air conditioning in the building, and knew Africa and knew the region like the back of his hand. He had been ambassador to Liberia before moving on to Nigeria, where he had in fact, been stationed for a number of years. He was followed by Bill Trueheart, who was brought in from Vietnam. He had never served in Africa before, struggled in dealing with the military government of General Gawan, who was there in power, and he lasted only a very short time before he was asked, or we say P&G'd politely, to leave the country. He then was replaced by a third ambassador who was then the head of USIS at the time, and he came in. But the interesting and fascinating thing about that was the entrance onto the scene of Eve's father. I think, and I thought about it just a little bit, and every time, occasionally, I think your father, Eve, may have been the very first of what is now a quite common occurrence, is the naming of a special envoy to deal with a very complicated political issue. Ambassador C. Clyde Ferguson was named by the then president to come out and to try to help mediate the conflict between Biafra and Nigeria, but more important, to prevent what many people thought was a genocide against Biafrans in the eastern region. They had been cut off from food and assistance, and it was C. Clyde Ferguson who was given the responsibility in the Department of State to try to mediate and also to prevent genocide from occurring, to ensure that there could be sufficient food and medicines going into the Biafran region. And this was quite a contest, because you had both Nigeria, northern Nigeria, western Nigeria, pitted against the Igbos in the east, who were largely viewed as a community that had embraced Catholicism, had embraced Western education, were the leading businessmen of the country, the leading educators of the country, and as people like Odumegwu Ojukwu, who came from a very distinguished family. He was an Oxford University graduate. His father at the time was one of the 2 or 3 wealthiest men in all of Nigeria, and he chose not to take over his family's business or to take on the mantle of a financier, but to go, as many distinguished Nigerians educated at that time, into the military and to become a senior officer. But it pitted Nigeria together. But the same kind of tension that existed on the outside existed on the inside of the embassy. As a young political officer there in the embassy, I watched the internal struggles that went on between those in the embassy who believed that genocide and atrocities were occurring in Biafra and that we needed to stand up and stop it, even if it meant separation of the 2 countries or 2 areas, and others on the inside who said it was more important to maintain the unity and integrity of Nigeria and that there was no genocide going on at all. Those tensions were quite serious, tug of wars politically in the views, and I think probably for me an early life's lesson about how to deal with situations like this, and basically what you look for. I really do believe that what we do, we should do based on sound facts, rich analysis, not hopes and aspirations, but in fact on what we think is important for U.S. interests, based on exactly what is happening analytically viewed so that we know what the consequences are of doing X, Y, and Z. But it was a useful tour. I went on from there, and I have spent almost the entire part of my Foreign Service career overseas in Africa. Only 2 stints away from Africa on the outside. I had the pleasure of spending several years, more than several, 4 long years, maybe more than that, in Lisbon, Portugal, working on and covering and responsible for domestic politics and NATO affairs there, and also in our embassy in London. But the bulk of my career has been across the African continent. Early on, I had an opportunity thanks to a very good boss, to have a choice that was good either way. He said to me, you can either go to Dakar, Senegal, or to Lourenço Marques, Mozambique. And I consulted with my wife and said, okay, it's time to go to Francophone Africa. But at the time, the Portuguese world was absolutely beginning to implode. The Carnation Revolution of April 1974 in Portugal had started. The Caetano Salazar dictatorship that had prevailed, very much like the Franco dictatorship in Spain, neighboring Spain, had fallen apart as a result of a military coup that occurred on April 24th, 1974, which had been precipitated by fighting and Portuguese losses in Guinea-Bissau, as well as intense fighting in Angola. And so we said we can come back to Dakar at some point. We probably won't ever get a chance to be on the edge of history if we turn away from Mozambique. And so we went south to see a new government, confront a new country, see new leaders. Samora Machel was just coming into power, taking over from Joaquim Chissano, who had been the interim president. And so we went there for nearly 3 years. And quite honestly, it has made very much of my Foreign Service career. Mozambique was extraordinarily rich and important to me. It catapulted me into a succession of jobs that made it natural for me to go to Lisbon, made it natural for me to work on Angola, which I did during very difficult times there, as we sort of again wrestled with policy issues related to our support for Jonas Savimbi, which caused us great grief with the MPLA government that was in power. But Mozambique was also important as well, because there were lots of things happening in southern Africa at the time. We saw the beginning of the Black consciousness movement, Steve Biko, the rise of Steve Biko and his death in 1976, 1975 in Johannesburg, which set off the cascading events that ultimately led to Nelson Mandela's being released in 1991. But for me, it also set off another extraordinary adventure that I will, always remember. And it sort of links me to a little part of this world up here on the hill, because I traveled while I was Deputy Chief of Mission in Mozambique to a remote part of the country way up north to a place called Kilimani. We flew up in a small four-seater airplane to meet someone that everyone said had been under house arrest. had been released from jail 6 months prior after 17 years, mostly in solitary confinement. People said that Julius Nyerere, who was then president of Tanzania, and other leaders in the area had decided that this man should be pushed aside so that Joshua Nkomo and others could get on with the struggle in Zimbabwe. So we traveled early one morning to a real small deserted airstrip. I was with a congressman now deceased by the name of Stephen Solars, and we got off of an airplane in a place that we had never been before, and were met by 3 men on the tarmac. One of them was Robert Mugabe. The other, if you know your history of Zimbabwe, was a man by the name of Edward Tekeri. I cannot remember the name of the third one, but it was clear after spending most of half a day with them, sufficient time for us to get back in this small plane and go back down to Maputo, that I had met the man who I said would be the next president of Zimbabwe. In fact, I came back to Maputo, wrote a cable, and in that cable was a famous line that said, I think I have met the man who is most likely to become the next president of Zimbabwe when it happens. It was a beginning of a long fascination. I later, of course, went to Zimbabwe as ambassador. I've known Robert Mugabe for a long time. I was honored to be here in Washington in a position to go and meet him when he was invited here in 1980 by Jimmy Carter, shortly after his independence, out there in April of 1980. And I have followed developments in Zimbabwe, just as I have in much of the Portuguese-speaking world of Africa for that long period of time. One gets involved over a career in cycles of things, and people said, Johnny, why haven't you ever ventured? Now, why haven't you ever ventured away from where you are? Every time I thought that it was time to take a spur off into another adventure, somebody would come along and say, we've got a job for you. And we think we want you to do this for us. Those jobs in Africa have always been more delightful than the jobs and the spurs off into other parts of the world. So I've stayed in this part of the world because of a deep interest and desire to be there, but also because of a desire to be relevant and to try to use what I've acquired to make a difference, a positive difference that we hope will be useful not only for myself, but for others who work for me and work on behalf of the interests of the United States and also the interests of developing stronger relations between Africa and the United States. I'll stop.
Evidently, we could listen to his stories all day long, but we don't have the whole day. So we want to take a couple of questions. If anybody has any questions for Ambassador Carson. Yes, in the back, right there. Speak up because you don't have a microphone, and I'll try to repeat your question.
I'm from Somalia. Really, thank you very much for the Secretary of State in Somalia, in that region. I have two questions, Mr. Secretary. Number one, it is what the American government think in the roadmap, which is, you know, Ambassador Lee and essentially is doing it now. It's going to be starting soon in Delaware. The second question is, as we know, the roadmap is not, the people are attending for that meeting is going to be just Puntland, Galmudug, and Sunna wal Jama'ah. And you know Somalia have more regions. Can you please specify what America thinks for that?
Want to take, do one or two, or you want me to do this one? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then make it very general because we want to make this not about policy. Okay. So yes.
Yeah.
have to end it at that.
Yeah.
Okay, so can you
Yeah,
answer?
yeah.
Dr.
Let me just say that we want to see the roadmap fully implemented. We think that implementation should, in fact, include the participation of those who are in South Central Somalia, but also those who live in Puntland as well. Those who are in government, in the parliament, but also civil society. We think that it is absolutely essential that this roadmap be implemented fully. It has 12 months to be implemented. It should be finished by August of next year, which is about 8 or 9 months from now. I think the roadmap has been slow in being unfolded. But I think that it is absolutely essential that everything be done as possible on the part of Somalis, both in and outside government, with the representation of civil society and women and the business community, to make sure that their voices are heard in this process for full implementation. So we're not backing away. We really are focused very heavily on Somalia. There's not a day that goes by that I am not engaged on issues related to Somalia and the desire for stability. I could say a lot about Somalia, but I won't. Somalia, is a problem at 3 levels. It's a problem for the country. It's a problem for the region. You just ask the Kenyans, who have 600,000 Somali refugees in their country, and it's a problem for the international community, all of us who see issues related to piracy, issues related to terrorism. And it's a problem for us in the United States in particular, because we see a lot of Somali Americans who have gone from places like Minneapolis and Cleveland to fight for al-Shabaab there in the region. We can't ignore Somalia. We do so at our peril at the global level, at the regional level. We need to pay attention to helping to put in place the environment conditions for a stable Somali state.
Do you have a non-policy question? Okay, great. Yes.
My name is Samson. I'm African American with Ethiopian origin. I'm also a civil servant. I appreciate your renewed interest in the diaspora and the politics. And that is a very key ingredient to make right for Africa, to come up with the right policy for Africa. And it's not a policy question, but it's I mean, there should be a forum for the African diaspora to contribute in the making of sustainable policy for Africa. It appears the U.S. policy towards Africa changes from one administration to the other. I think the focus should be in building institutions. Oftentimes, the relationship is with the existing governments, and when the government goes away, things change. I think the best way to advance U.S. interests, like any other country, is to build relationship with the people and building institutions. When we came here, I saw the secretary going through the security check. There are institutions in place in this country that treats everyone the same. Had it been in Africa, they would roll red carpet for them.
We should have.
We forgot to tell the police.
That's our.
I'm very fortunate, really, to be in this wonderful country, because I came here as a teenager. I'm in the senior leadership position in the government. I appreciate the fact that I've seen other systems in other parts of the world. I'm able to appreciate it. But I want to contribute what I've learned, the experience that I have. I want to be part of the policy making of Africa. As an Ethiopian, that has vested interest in what happens in Ethiopia. And a fellow Nigeria, Ghana, they would have vested interest just like I am. So please make us part of the decisions and the policy making of
Let me just a quick response. Thank you very much. 2 or 3 quick points in response. First of all, it is about institutions. The strength of our nation is built around the strength, the integrity, and the respect of our institutions. We have had in this country a constitution and institutions that have been rigid and strong enough to prevent bad things from sweeping us away, but yet flexible and malleable enough for great people and geniuses and good stewards to take us to commanding heights. But it is all about the respect for the institutions that are around us, whether it's the executive branch, or whether it's the building that's right next door to yours, the Supreme Court building, or whether it's the building on the other sides, the House and the Senate. But it is about institutions, and those institutions help to shape the character of the country. It helps to shape the character of all of its citizens. So institutions are there, and our relationships are with institutions. I think we've had some great leaders. We have a great leader right now. But it is the thing that is going to be most enduring for us is the same thing that made us strong 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 75 years ago, 100 years ago, will make us strong in the future. And that is the strength and validity of our institutions. An institution that allows good leaders to take us to great heights and prevents bad leaders from taking us down. And that's a powerful thing. Second thing is that the strength of this country is reflected in the character of our #1 citizen today, has been, is today, and will be tomorrow, the strength of our open doors. Everyone in this country, whether they are a new citizen, newly born, newly arrived, or newly sworn in as a citizen, or whether they have been here for 15 or 20 generations, 15, 10, or 5, is the notion that everybody here has come from someplace. That someplace may be recent, that someplace may be old, but the strength and character of who we are is based on our open doors, our willingness to keep those doors open and to allow people to come into our country, benefit from the strength and values and principles that we have in our institutions, as well as to make contributions. So it's important. It really is very important that we continue constantly to enrich ourselves, but to grow ourselves by the institutions that shape this country, which is very there. Third point is that Secretary Clinton has made it a point of trying to listen to all diaspora voices. And certainly in the coming up to 3 years that I've been in the department, in the current position I've been in, we have held several very large events for the diaspora community. In this instance, for me, the African diaspora, listening to what the diaspora has to say about areas of concern and interest to them, sharing with them the nature of our policies and policy directions, and trying to reach out, as we all want to do in this kind of a business, to develop a constituency which supports the dynamic nature of our foreign policy abroad, not just in Latin America or the Middle East or Europe, but also in Africa. And so constituencies are a part of that. I know the same thing goes on at the White House. I've been in sessions where we have briefed and listened to diaspora groups. I think this is also critical as well as we move forward. I'll stop. I know I've got something else to do too. And
thank you very much for coming. Please thank Ambassador Carson for sharing his time, which is so precious these days. We made a promise to him that we're going to keep. So thank you very much for coming. And please look for our programs next year. Happy holidays.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.